Hi, everybody. This is Lauren Baker, founder of Search Engine Journal, and welcome to today's SEJ Marketing Think Tank. With me, I'd like to introduce Colin Holmes, a founder and CEO at Chapmeter. Please say hi, Colin.
Hello. I am turning on my webcam now.
Awesome. So if you wouldn't mind clicking over to the first slide, and then what I'm going to do is a little bit of housekeeping to kind of introduce everyone to what they'll expect from the overall webinar, everything that we'll be doing, and then we'll take it from there. But yes, so the official hashtag is hashtag SEJ Think Tank. If you look on your go-to webinar control panel, you'll see that there's a question box. After Colin's finished with his presentation, we're going to open things up to Q&A. If you have any questions that pop up during the presentation, please write them in there. I'll be going through them and asking Colin. If we don't get all your questions answered, we'll go ahead and take care of those after the presentation and send them to you as well. Also, during the presentation, we'll have a couple of polls. So it's always great for our host to get some information on everyone. So please take the time to fill out those polls. We'll launch them accordingly. And I believe we're going to have a video and some other experiences as well. Right, Colin?
You got it.
All right.
Try to make it interactive, fun, and exciting.
Awesome. Well, let's get started, everybody.
Okay, great. Well, thank you for that introduction. Appreciate it. Just to introduce myself, a little bit of background. So about 20 years tech experience back to 98, 99 when the dot-com boom happened. Basically about 20 years experience in marketing and product development in both the internet and mobile spaces. Worked at my previous startup, was actually pioneering both voice search and mobile local search on flip phones about 12 to 14 years ago. So that's kind of how I got into the world of Chapmeter around local search. It started the company back in 2009. So right as smartphones were really kind of driving, getting adopted, if you will. iPhone had just come out in 2008 and recognized that mobile local search was a new marketing channel. And now what's most interesting is the voice search adoption that we're going to be talking about today, because that's something that at Enable we were pioneering, again, almost 12 to 14 years ago. We'll talk about that in our deck a little bit. But just an overview on Chapmeter. We are a local brand management platform, so essentially helping customers with things like listing management and reputation management via a dashboard or software tool. We're managing over 1.5 million stores, as you can see, with some of the biggest brands in the country. And so we typically work with multi-locations or with agencies or software providers, resellers that work with location entities. So within the the presentation today, we will talk a little bit about voice search and its impact specifically on local search, since that's really a key area of expertise that we'll be talking about, from my background, as well as a lot of the data that we've collected along the way, and some really key insights on voice search and local. So the agenda, again, so we're going to be talking obviously specifically about voice search, how it's being used today. We're going to go through the evolution to start. So where did voice search start? How did we get to where we are today? And what is the future of voice search? Some really interesting kind of case studies of applications of voice search. And most importantly, probably the precipice of why many of you guys are joining today is really understanding, how do I create a voice engine optimization strategy? So how do I optimize for voice search? What are the most important components of powering kind of, in the world we'll talk about is powering those answers for the questions that people are speaking into their various devices. All right, so let's start looking, I'd love to start back with a little evolution of voice search. It's really pretty interesting to see how far it has come and really how quickly it's come recently. So voice recognition dates back to about the 50s. You can see Audrey here was one of the first implementations and it really was just a digit recognition. So you could really just say 0 through 9, essentially, or a string of digits. And this was all pioneered by American Bell, as you can see, in terms of voice recognition. So at that point, it wasn't even words. So this weird company called International Business Machines came along in the 60s and added vocabulary. So it was a 16-word vocabulary plus the 10 digits. So it got 10 years, essentially, to only get to 16-word voice recognition. And this pretty funny logo. Many of you guys would recognize this company more as IBM, but this is their logo when they started back in the 60s. So fast forward another 14 years, that grew to a vocabulary of about 1,000 words. So this was a project from the Carnegie Mellon in the 70s called Harpy. Not sure how they came up with that name, but they were successful at getting to about 1,000 words. And about a decade later, I forget which toy company launched this, but the world's first interactive doll called Julie was launched. You can't tell here, it looks pretty normal, but I would recommend Googling some videos on Julie because she ends up with some pretty creepy advertising. But it was that ability to really speak to Julie and ask her questions. She would recognize what you're saying and actually respond back. So really cool stuff, and revolutionary technology, and really the first play into the consumer space, and really getting consumers to kind of be familiar with voice recognition technology. A few years later, a company called Nuance launched Dragon. So some of you may have heard this Dragon Dictate, which essentially allows you to dictate voice to text, say speaking an email that you're writing or Word document. And at that time when they launched, it was about a $9,000 product. So you can imagine there was very few using it. It was really for a certain specific audience. The price dropped pretty dramatically, but it took 7 years to get there. So about a $700 product was released in '97, but that still required a 45-minute training where the program would actually work, and still recognition values or accuracy levels were still pretty low. Fast forward to the 2000s, obviously self-serving with my previous company here around D-Enable. We were really helping pioneer mobile local search and voice search within that space. So around that time, speech recognition technology was about 80% accuracy, but much like you can do in apps today, in local search apps, we were powering that ability to say Starbucks on your phone. We would take that recording and send it to a server, do voice recognition processing. Then we would take that result and send it to another server and get local search results. And within a mere 15 seconds, you could see Starbucks locations on a map. So pretty hilarious as you think about it today. I do remember one big party we had in which we broke that 10-second barrier. So also pretty funny to think about. But as we know, speech recognition was often the butt of many jokes because of the accuracy levels. It really wasn't consumer acceptable at that level. However, today there's been massive improvements. We are reaching now a 95% accuracy level, and so that's really what's driving this. We've seen voice search on, starting off with Siri originally on the iPhone, and now Google on the Android. It's in your car, and now, of course, with Alexa and Google Home and other devices, we're starting to see rapid adoption. And so it essentially is this growth of accuracy over the last really 5 to 10 years, getting us to a 95% level that's really driving the adoption. And so it's really been a huge increase within the last few years. And here are some of the usage metrics. 1 in 5 online adults that are actually using voice search. So about 20% of the population, and that's forecasted to grow to about 50% by 2020. So half of the world's searches are going to be conducted by voice, which is pretty amazing. It means that you better get ready. And specifically within local search today, about 46% of the users, or essentially half the users that are using voice search, are using that to find local businesses on a daily basis. So if you're in the local search space, you've got to have a solution. You've got to be ready for this change that's coming. So a couple interesting applications. So as we've been talking a little bit about home devices, so there's been a number of devices that consumers are adapting, not just in the home. There's obviously phone, tablets, but TVs, there's TVs you can speak to now, speakers, lighting and temperature control, and of course, everyone, many people have video game consoles. There's all these multiple devices that are going on, but consumers really are looking for a way to centralize that, and that's one of the things that Alexa is really trying to do with their approach, is being able to be that single assistant and that voice assistant to help you manage all of your devices. You're starting to see a lot of growth there. You're seeing Alexa being built into multiple devices. This is a great example of that. So here you can see the penetration of different devices among different types of consumers. So millennials, as you can imagine, is going to have a much higher adoption of things like wireless speakers. But as you get older, what's really interesting is you see things like the thermostat growing up in massive adoption in terms of devices and device adoption. So there was actually a recent skit on Saturday Night Live I'm going to share with you guys really quick on the adoption of some of these devices among the baby boomers. So let's take a quick look at that video. Hopefully you guys can hear that.
It's loading.
Do I need to hit play? Probably.
Yeah.
Pair it to smart devices like your thermostat.
Alessandra, turn the heat up.
The room is already 100 degrees.
Are you trying to kill me, Alessandra?
So pretty funny, using voice really to control the thermostat. I'm sure many of you guys can relate if you're when you go to your parents' house or grandparents' house. In many cases, you get the idea. So that was a little funny skit about the different adoption of voice search with different generations. Some of the younger generation that are going to college now is going to get a great experience.
Real quick, we lost your screen for the slideshow presentation.
Sorry, you got to flip it back. Appreciate that.
No problem.
Back to. All right, able to see the PowerPoint now?
Yep. Just needs to be put in presentation mode. We'll be good.
Beautiful. Okay,
awesome.
And we're back.
Thank you.
Okay, we lost it. Here we go. Okay, so as I mentioned, college students now have an opportunity to use Echo in brand new ways. So essentially looking at their class schedule, even looking at tuition payment, but they probably don't want to ignore that. Meal card balances, setting alarms, the last thing you want is sleeping through your midterm. You get the idea. But Alexa is powering new applications. This is another partnership they're doing with Marriott and Amazon. So really having a virtual concierge. So you don't have to pick up the phone anymore. Tell Alexa you need more towels. Or like we were just laughing about, controlling the in-room temperature. Finding local restaurants and attractions. That's very compelling, obviously, from a local search perspective when you're traveling and staying at different places. So it's still pretty early in the test bed market. There's about 10 Marriott locations in which they're powering this application. But that really has been Alexa's approach. And Amazon's approach is to really provide lots of applications for basically Alexa to be your assistant. Now let's talk specifically about the approach within voice and search. So, and really its impact on traditional search. So, of course, if you're typing in a result or typing in a question, you end up with a google.com results page. And we'd like to remind clients or remind people that nearly a third of the clicks really go to the first position. So this is just an example of Mark Wahlberg's restaurant. What is Mark Wahlberg's restaurant called? Called Wahlburgers. So again, that's a type-in question, but you're going to get multiple results pages, and consumers may look at these other results and click on something else. Very different within voice search, right? If you ask Alexa or you ask Google, they'll often even read their answer back to you. So what is Wahlberg's restaurant? Wahlburgers is a casual dining burger restaurant and bar. And so they're making one single selection there. That means it's more competitive than ever to get to the top of those results or answers. So that's hugely impacted when you think about it from a marketing perspective, how you need to compete for that top spot. Now, taking that one step further, we also like to communicate that the queries are very different. So, the world of marketing in search marketing has evolved from keyword-based queries, and then we started talking about kind of long tail keywords. But within voice search, they're actually asking questions. They want questions and they want answers. They're trying to solve problems. So here's a great example of a local search query. Where is the best soy milk vanilla latte downtown? Pretty common. That would make sense from that perspective. However, not always the best results from what we're seeing. So this is a search query on Siri on an Apple device. So essentially what comes up here, you can see roast coffee bar, some books and cafe. You can see it's not specifically driven by location because this one is 0.4 miles away, while these are 0.6 and 0.7 miles away. In addition, I probably wouldn't choose a Mexican joint or a Tokyo deli as the place to go to for my best soy milk vanilla latte. And so there might be some better optimization they can do with results. Certainly, Japanese could be offering the best soy milk vanilla latte. I don't live in San Francisco, but you get the idea. This is a result that I did here locally in San Diego. So looking at the example of where is the best soy milk vanilla latte downtown, you can see Google's actually giving me a single result. So that same concept of powering one result and one answer is already happening within Google and the Android device. That is a little different of looking at best coffee downtown. This is a voice search for best coffee downtown. They are powering multiple results. And what's also important to understand is, again, these are not always driven on location. So when you're looking for best coffee, they will look at some results. You can see the example. This is also a coffee bean, this red dot here. But this, 4 or 5 blocks away, they're showing as a top result. That's what this list is here in the top 3. So it is a mix of things that we'll talk a little bit about in the optimization section, things like name, address, phone number consistency. Do you have photos tied to your listings? Do you have reviews? That really plays into that local algorithm, not just location. So what is a common myth, I should say? Only a few businesses need a voice search strategy. That is definitely not the case as we've been talking about. So essentially, SEO is changing completely with voice search. This is the SEO that you've learned in the past, right? Keywords, it's about content and building content for Google to grab and understand things like backlinks, etc. But, that learning of old really is about, is as ancient as the turn of the century. Right, that education that you've got is changing, and so you really need to do a deep dive on what's going on. It really is that perfect storm for any of you guys that saw that movie. I'm obviously dating myself a little bit, but you get that idea. And I forget what the perfect storm was. I think it was a cyclone and a tornado coming together, which you can kind of see on the visual here. But essentially, that is what's happening within content marketing and voice search, because what the content you're building today is not what Google is looking for, and that's not what consumers are looking for in terms of solving their problems and getting answers to their questions. So if you're not like Marky Mark here in the movie, this should be the look on your face as you think about voice search and the challenges going forward. And the reason why I say that is so impactful is because of the massive adoption, right? If it wasn't being adopted this quickly, it wouldn't be as big of an issue or as big as an emergency. But, you know, we're here at 2018 with about 20%, and that's growing to 50% of all search activity. And if you think about 50% of all searches resulting in one single result, how mind-blowing that is in terms of the level of competition and the amount of content and the change of the content world in order to optimize for that content. So if you don't have a voice search strategy, if you're not thinking about voice search, you will be left behind. So SEO, I'm never going to say SEO is dead. I've been in SEO for a long time, so I'm not preaching that same word that many people have over the years, but you need to add voice engine optimization. And that's the new term that actually Chapmeter has trademarked this term called VEO. So instead of SEO, we're talking about VEO, voice engine optimization. What does that actually mean? Optimizing your content, location information if you're working with locations, and brand information to essentially increase your likelihood of powering those voice search results. So again, when customers are trying to solve those problems, being able to be the answer to their problem. Why VEO? Essentially, it's very basic. Voice search is much easier. It's easier to speak than type, especially when you're on the go, and everybody is on the go, as we know these days. And of course, there's only one result. So if that's not you, game over. Voice search is 3 times more likely to be used than text for a local search. So again, that concept of being on the go is vitally impactful for local search, and that's why we're going to specifically spend extra time talking about voice search and local here in a minute. But this is also the penetration of voice search across different industries. So it's not like if you're in one certain industry, you need voice search. It's hitting all of these industries. So food and beverage, of course, as we talked about, restaurant searches, etc. Health was really interesting to see this pop up. So people using things like Alexa to research, health issues or health providers. You can see obviously sports and news and media. We all use it to answer those sports questions in trivia. But you get the idea. It's really across the board in terms of adoption and problems that they're trying to solve and solutions and services that they're looking for. So this brings us to our first poll question. I think we'll need to turn on the poll functionality if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, excellent.
But I'll read these.
Thanks, Colin. Getting this done right now. So launching the first poll. Will you be implementing a VEO strategy in your marketing efforts after this webinar? Please select one of the following. I want to learn about VEO and its impact on e-commerce. I want to learn more about VEO and its impact on local search. I'm going to create a VEO strategy for my local business right now.
Are you able to show, it looks like this is not the matching poll slide. That might be a different poll slide. Are you able to run the other poll, or should I jump ahead? What do you recommend?
Yeah, hold on. One moment. Here we go. Okay. The biggest challenge with voice search? What is your biggest challenge with voice?
Poll slides. Right now, the one we're looking at is, will you be implementing a VEO strategy?
Yeah, let me launch that again. This might be outdated.
Sit tight, everyone. A little technical difficulty.
Yeah. Will you be implementing a VEO strategy? 46%
That's it.
said for local search, 28% for e-commerce, 26% for your business right now, and 0 said I think it's too early for voice search. That's some pretty good feedback right there.
That is a good sign, yes. So clearly the people that are dialing in for a reason. They realize that adoption is through the roof, and it's exciting to see that that's the case. So good to hear, and hopefully we can give you some good takeaways here as we continue on to talk about what you should be doing to implement some of those strategies. So next up is that kind of agenda. So what are the steps to creating a VEO strategy? And we'll dive into these in a little more detail, but essentially optimizing your business listings, your name, address, and phone number. If you are working with retailers or people with physical locations, speeding up your website. We'll talk about that in detail. That was just launched by Google and the impact there, building new content, providing answers. And of course, as marketers, it's all about test, test, test. Just like anything, you got to do A/B testing. So it starts with really understanding content and content sources behind some of these devices. So I thought this was particularly compelling to really understand who's getting some of their data from specifically. And Amazon and Alexa, now of course this is specifically for local search results, they've partnered up with Yelp for that data. So if you do ask, is my favorite restaurant open, or let's say, is Home Depot, near me still open? That actually data would be powered by Yelp. So it's important to make sure that your Yelp information is actually accurate, your name, address, phone number, your store hours, etc., is accurate, so that you're driving customers, again, to those stores. And again, on a local perspective, Google is obviously driven by Google Maps. Siri is obviously driven by Apple Maps. And Cortana, which is Microsoft's built-in voice search on their desktops, is all powered by Bing. And if you're looking specifically at, again, local search, that would be powered by Bing Maps. So you want to make sure your information is accurate on those sites in order to make sure you're powering great results. So the first step is keeping your business listings clean and accurate. So, and again, we're talking about, this is physical retailers, name, address, phone number components in terms of business listings. So an estimated $10 billion is lost each year due to inaccurate listings. If you have the wrong phone number or an old address, that's lost revenue. Smart speakers only give you one answer. So again, understanding that you need to power the number one position. And so how do you get to that number one position? As I was mentioning before, business listing consistency, the name, address, and phone number consistency is the biggest driver for Google Maps and Google Local, or Bing Maps, Bing Local, etc. So that's how search engines are driving the rankings. The second most important component is your reviews. So what kind of reviews do you have, the quantity and quality of those reviews, and how do those reviews compare with other competitors in your nearby area? Vitally important to driving that information. So that brings us to our next question. Because of the importance of business listings, we wanted to take a poll here and better understand how you guys are managing your business listings. Hopefully we have this poll slide.
We don't have this question loaded up. I think we have the previous ones before there was a change or whatnot. But
Gotcha.
if everyone could just type into the question box right now your answer. So how are you managing your business listings? Yeah, then we can definitely get that feedback from everyone.
Okay, great.
Too.
Let's just quickly read through those then to make sure everybody's clear. So how are you managing your business listings? One, we manage them internally. So this, again, if you're a brand or you're an agency, are you managing your name, address, and phone number internally with your own people? Two, you hired an external agency to manage and update those business listings. So really an agency or service provider that's focused on that. Three, we're not managing our listings. Or I just don't know how our company manages our listings. Or four, our company doesn't manage any business listings. We don't have any business listings, or we don't manage businesses that have locations. So if you're an agency that doesn't work with people with physical locations, then number 4 would be your answer. So if you guys wouldn't mind just typing that 1, 2, 3, 4, then we can kind of pull that up later. We obviously won't be able to share the
Awesome.
results,
Yeah,
but we
and
can get that figured out later.
our answer box is blowing up. So just about everyone's typing in answers and more information. So this is great. Thank you.
Beautiful. Okay, sorry about the last minute glitch. As you know, we're often updating these PowerPoint decks right up until the last minute. So appreciate your patience there. So creating your VEO strategy, site speed. So I'm sure many of you guys have heard recently, Google just launched this for mobile search and mobile optimization within the last few days. They confirmed in January that this is going to be a ranking factor, and they just launched it this week. So if your page takes more than 5 seconds to load, they're saying essentially that customers are 90% or more likely to leave. And the average website today, by the way, takes about 9 seconds to load. So most websites are going to fail here. And what that means is Google is basically going to punish you in the rankings. They did confirm that the slowest sites will never show up on page 1. Again, those are probably the slowest sites, but it is a major part of the ranking factor for mobile search because, again, on your mobile phone, if you do a search and you go to pull up a web page, we all know if it takes more than a few seconds to load, I'm going to go open another app. I'm going to do something else. And so they want to power the best customer experience there. So make sure your website is loading quickly, your web pages are loading quickly. That also includes location pages. Again, if you're a multi-location retailer, you should test those pages as well. 3, essentially you need a new content strategy. It's all about us focusing on questions. So most people say when they're talking to a voice assistant, it feels like they're talking to a friend. So they use questions, they use queries. Again, they're trying to solve problems. So the answer is simply providing Google and other voice engines with answers. That's the idea, providing them with those questions and answers, common questions that your customers might be asking. So think about those things your target audience is most likely to ask in which you can provide the best solutions. And again, that's that idea of conversion and conversion rate. Just because you might think of the most popular questions, if you don't have the best solution, don't target those. Target the ones that you feel like you're going to be able to convert on. Great example of the difference, again, of typing versus speaking. So coffee versus near me versus where is the best soy milk vanilla latte downtown. So again, thinking about those questions that your consumers may be asking and then building and providing answers. So essentially here you can see what is Comic-Con. So this is actually what we call a featured snippet. So you can see what is the Comic-Con event that came up. So if you essentially speak what is Comic-Con, that comes up. And if we open that to the web page, hopefully you guys will see this, it goes to comiccon.com. So again, Google is crawling this page, and Comic-Con has actually identified this as a snippet essentially to answer that question. So it's tagged properly in terms of its header tags that we'll talk about in a minute, so that Google can use this as a way to answer a question. As you can see, 40% of the voice search answers are actually coming from those snippets. So if you can tell Google these answers to these questions, they're going to be able to optimize. Becoming a featured snippet really is that idea of answering specific questions. So what can I do to become a featured snippet? And that's obviously the next question. Google does lean on the top ranked websites to pull these snippets. So they're obviously going to value the most trafficked websites in order to pull these answers. However, what you can see here is that snippets are featured anywhere on the results page, and only 30% of actual snippets rank at number 1. So by being able to add those questions and answers, you can actually get yourself on page one. You may not be the most trafficked website if you can provide the proper answer to those questions. So how do you do that? What does that mean? Think of things like creating an FAQ page. So creating content that's really driven around those that will drive conversions. And of course, keep it simple, right? It needs to be at an easy reading level. Imagine someone or Google on their cell phone that's reading those results back, or Alexa reading those results back. You got to dumb it down. It's got to be simple, less than a paragraph, couple sentences, 9th grade reading level, probably at the highest. Update your content often. Just like anything, Google is going to be looking for fresh content and updated answers. So make sure you keep that updated. And of course, using the proper market language. So using the proper Google schema to identify those questions and headers. So tagging the actual questions so that Google, when they're scraping those pages and crawling those pages, will identify those questions and can use those as featured snippets. Specifically within Google My Business, so again, you'll be familiar with this term if you work with locations or physical retailers. Google My Business is that interface to those, basically for your Maps locations. And so they have enabled something called Q&A. Many of you guys have probably seen this. So it's important to answer those questions that are on there. That is a very logical place in which Google will be using those as a place to power voice search. So making sure that you've answered your questions on there, because remember, anyone can answer a question on Google My Business. So get in there before other consumers get in there. We have seen issues in which consumers give the wrong answer, or they could be leaving a pretty negative answer. So they could be driving your reputation down based on those answers. So if you own locations, you're managing locations, go in and figure out what those questions are and make sure you give great answers to those questions. Secondly, create new questions. So anyone can actually create a question. So you want to make sure that you're first to the party. So again, if you're managing locations, managing Google My Business pages, create compelling questions that are actually going to drive conversion, that can show up as answers on those pages as those snippets, and be able to answer those questions that will drive customers to your location. All right, and another great source of content is actually the reviews that are coming in. So for clarity here, Yelp is already doing this for local results outside of categories. What does that actually mean? So let's say, for example, somebody is looking for creamy lattes. So somebody types in creamy lattes into Yelp or into Google. That's not an actual category, if you will, that you can optimize and say we provide, that's a service offering, right? And so what's happening is someone like Yelp actually will go into the reviews and look for those keywords and look for interesting comments. So that's another area where you can look at this content and see what customers are asking about. Is a great way to then take that content and put that on your Google My Business Q&A form. So who has the creamiest lattes, or do you offer creamy lattes would be a question. And an answer would be, yes, of course, we have the best creamy lattes in town, or our creamy lattes have the most milk, or what goes into a creamy latte, but you get the concept of being able to look at that content and then even encouraging customers that are leaving reviews as you educate, people at the store level to talk about some of those products and services that will allow you to, again, optimize and increase your rankings. At the end of the day, it's all about rankings, about getting in front of, your locations, getting in front of potential customers, and again, solving those problems from a Q&A perspective. And of course, test. It's all about testing. Test the voice search function. Look at results. So how to test voice search. Again, you're going to have to buy all these devices, unfortunately. So getting Alexa, getting a Google phone, getting an Android phone, so that you can understand and see the results that are coming through. Where and who are those results being pulled from? how many different listings and results does each offer you? We gave you a little snippet earlier of Siri versus Android powering one result, Siri powering multiple results. You've got to know these things. You got to write them all down, put them in spreadsheets. You guys are very familiar with Excel. That is going to be a requirement to see what the results are and then track your improvements over time. So where are you ranking? Are you coming up and ranking at all? And of course, where are your competitors ranking? Vitally important for not only a small business, but even for looking at multi-location and chains. And there's obviously a lot of work that goes into that. It will require resources. So it's important to think about when planning your strategy and executing on your strategy of who can start to tackle these things within your organization. And finally, the last little plug here. So essentially, this is Chapmeter. We're local SEO tools all under one roof. We help clients manage and respond to customer reviews from 20 different sites. We help you clean up your business listings on a huge number of directories. We have social listening and publishing, and of course, tracking all of your rankings and analytics, showing you, are you on page one or not for different queries. And with our Google partnership and Yelp partnerships, we're able to actually show you increases in traffic and volume over time. So on average, we typically see about a 25 to 30% increase in driving customers into their store locations. And we show that all in our dashboard right in front of you. So I think that's everything that I had. I'm happy to open this up to Q&A.
Awesome. So we have quite a bit of questions already. So thanks for that, Colin. And you definitely got some conversation going in the question box here, and I see some coming in. So as anything comes to mind, please feel free to drop it in the question box, and we'll go ahead and get started. I got a lot of questions about brick and mortar versus online only. So does voice search apply to only brick and mortar, or can online only, maybe e-commerce? So you think a lot of national retailers right now, they're kind of transitioning to online. You have a lot of startups that have taken the place of national retailers, et cetera, et cetera. How does VEO apply to organizations without a brick and mortar presence?
Yeah, I think clearly it applies to both. So everyone is going to need a voice. If half of searches are voice driven, that means everybody needs to have a strategy in place. There's just different techniques of optimizing for local versus optimizing for organic or page one of Google, if you will. It's just a nature of kind of what you're looking for and what you're looking to do. For example, let's say, for example, I am looking for, what's a good example? I want to purchase a TV. So obviously, if I'm looking for a TV, I may want to buy online or I want to buy locally. That's going to depend on your approach. If I'm doing a lot of research around what is the best TV, what is the best TV for me? That's a really interesting, compelling voice search query in which someone may be looking at, more of the features and functionality. Now, whether actually Google knows enough about you to recommend one TV versus another is a scary and compelling thought. But that could be very different than, what's the nearest TV near me, or I'd like to buy a TV near me. Those are very different things to think about of e-commerce versus someone with local intent. And that's where, when you look at someone with local intent, there's a lot of different things that go into that local SEO algorithm. There's a ton of stuff on our blog that we talk about, so you need to learn more about it. I would encourage you looking there, as well as contacting Chapmeter, because we can help you better understand what's important for local search and really getting to the top of local search results, whether it could be, and that could be google.com, right? There's a 3-pack that shows up, or it could be somebody just opening Google Maps and looking for a TV near me. And there's some interesting and dynamic challenges that go along with even that product search within the local space. Because you're more likely to look for things like an electronics store, et cetera, from that perspective. But it really depends on, your customers as agencies. And I'm imagining most of the people viewing today are agencies and service providers. So it really depends on your customer and what their approach is. But clearly, from an adoption perspective, everybody is going to need to come up with a strategy of voice search and getting yourself to the top of the page and really getting yourself to that number one answer in solving that problem.
Excellent, thank you. And I think also one thing to remember is that you may consider yourself to be online only and not local, but for most sectors, Google displays localized results anyway, right? So if you're an online dating site, for example, and someone searches for online dating in LA and someone searches for online dating in Austin, they're going to see completely different results based upon businesses in the area, online only businesses in the area, different newspapers in the areas that have written about that subject matter. So keep that in mind, even though you're online only, checking out your results in major metros and who your true competitors are is a big deal. And it's usually like one of those first steps in understanding how local search works. And I imagine will be a big deal in voice as well. Couldn't help but notice that with the, I don't remember the exact percentages in front of me, but it was 50% of all searches should be voiced by 2020, and a good amount of them were home-oriented services. Can't help but that really ties in with things like Amazon Home Services launching, right? So with Alexa, connecting consumers directly to the ability to hire someone to cut their lawn, fix their dishwasher, et cetera, through Amazon. And I imagine Google will be doing the same with Google Home. How can someone compete with that?
Yeah, no, it's a big challenge right now. There's multiple large players really going after that home services market, as you mentioned. Lots of money being dumped in and going after it. Specifically, one thing you didn't mention is the Google Home Services. So for anyone that people that are in that space I'm sure are clearly aware, but Google now offers kind of a bidding process as well as a guarantee. So Google will actually guarantee, I forget what the dollar amount is, it may be $2,000 or $5,000 of services from one of their providers, which is pretty phenomenal and pretty mind-blowing in terms of guaranteeing that someone will be happy with the service from a contractor, whether it's your plumber or your dishwasher repairman. That's pretty mind-blowing in terms of creating kind of that guarantee. A really interesting case study I can talk a little bit about in home services is we work with we actually work with Sears Home Services, and we've been working with them for years now around their actually profitable division, which is the Sears appliance repair. So for years and years, we were powering this platform and helping them optimize for local search results. And because of the success we saw, which I believe was about a 600% improvement, they actually ended up diversifying their listings from just appliance repair to dishwasher repair, to all the appliances they service, to plumber repair. So they actually went from about 600 listings to over, I think, 3,000 listings based upon the results of what you can do if you properly optimize for local search. And of course, that's going to change incredibly with voice search. And we've been, in conversations with them today because, again, that concept or aspect of who can help fix my dishwasher near me is a very compelling one, in which certainly they are not ready and many people are not ready. That's, again, a big area of how do I optimize my content, and really kind of there's some catching up that needs to be done even from Google and Yelp and others in terms of being able to answer those questions, having the content available to answer those questions from a local search perspective. So lots of money being dumped into that space. It's you look at other players like Home Advisor and others. It's incredibly competitive. It's a low margin. It's low tech as well. So people that are actually the service providers in that space, we're not that familiar with how this tech works as well. So there's a lot of education that needs to happen there as well.
Awesome. Yeah, and it just sounds like there's multiple different referral channels that are going to open up from this as well, right? So if you're a single provider of a service, or say if you have multiple different services in multiple different towns, you shouldn't necessarily think of it as, hey, Google or Amazon are going to take over. You should think of it as, hey, I can compete within Amazon, I can compete within Google, and then I can compete within my own right as well, and look at that as just different avenues to pull from, and make sure that you're optimizing the data that you have available to be able to compete within their ecosystems too. You know what? We have polls ready to go. So if everyone's still here before the next question, I am going to be launching the next poll that we didn't have a chance to go through earlier. So
Great.
Poll number 1, when will you be implementing a VEO strategy? Immediately. I've already started. It's in our 2018 marketing strategy, and we're past halfway through of 2018. It's in our 2019 marketing strategy, and then no plans, waiting for more adoption and proof if it's needed. So if everyone could take the time and just answer one of these before our next question, that would be fantastic. I see we have about 45% of you have voted. Let's try to get it up to 60, 70%. I know we're doing the Q&A session here, but time to kind of get back into this and answer this real quickly. So we're at 55, 56, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I'm going to close the poll, so now it's your final chance. And it looks like most folks either have started, have this as part of their strategy in 2018, or in next year. So that's great. And it's good to hear that people are already on top of this as well. So thanks for that. Any thoughts there, Colin?
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. Good to see that people are taking this seriously. Clearly, everyone is using voice search, and so they recognize that they need to start tackling it. So now is the time. You cannot wait any longer.
Awesome. So our next question, we got about actually 20 different folks answering different forms of the same question. How can they track traffic that comes to the site via voice search? Is that something trackable via analytics, via Search Console, via any tools out there?
Is that oh, sorry, I thought it was a poll.
Yeah, no, sorry, it's the next question. So
can you
how
repeat
does
the
someone,
question, please?
how do I know which traffic I'm getting to my website that comes from voice search?
Yeah. So this is a particular challenge. Unfortunately, nobody is really delivering those results from a analytics perspective. You can Google console, for example, doesn't show you which ones come from voice search versus typed or text typed in. Excuse me. I do know that specifically on some of the Yelp analytics, and again, this is for those local people working with local physical locations, they actually in their console do report on desktop versus mobile activity. So you could lean on saying, there's more activity going on in mobile versus desktop. And again, that could be the problem is you don't know how much that's coming from, say, a Yelp versus maybe an Alexa that's powered by Yelp. So unfortunately, there's not a lot of most of the voice search providers are not releasing or have opened up analytics at this point. As far as I'm aware, I haven't come across it. So you're going to have to make some assumptions on that side. Again, looking at your industry, we've provided you with some charts of adoption within that. So as we know, sometimes marketing is about assumptions if you don't have the data. So using that kind of percentage adoption how it's being adopted in your industry would be the best way I would recommend leaning on that data.
Excellent. One thing to keep in mind too is that Google hasn't gotten very far on their local calling and clicking data either. So it might take them a
Yeah.
while to get things on the VEO side. I would say that, tracking your featured snippets might be a way to predict which queries or pages are actually getting some of those answers in voice search and things along those lines as
That's a great
well.
idea. Yeah, thought about that is looking at the tracking metrics specifically on those snippets. So get those snippets out there.
Yep, optimize for those snippets. And we have a question about optimizing for those snippets, but beforehand, I'm going to launch the last poll, which is a very easy one. It's going right now. So how are you managing your business listings? So Google Business, Yelp, or Google My Business, Yelp, everything else out there. Are you managing them internally as a company? Are you working with an external agency to handle those listings? Are you not managing those listings at all, or you don't know who's set them up or anything along those lines in the past, or you don't have any business listings or locations to manage? So if you could take a second just to answer this quick poll. We're already at 50%, so this one's a bit quicker than the last one. I'll go ahead and close it in a second. We'll do a nice little countdown. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, final chance. And overwhelmingly, companies, agencies, whatnot, probably companies are managing everything internally with 9%, 9%, 5%. So have a lot of folks that are trying to grasp and grasp that bull internally. It can be a challenge though.
Well, that's good to hear. It sounds like we have the right audience as well in terms of kind of voice search and local search, because they are managing things like business listings. So that's exciting to hear. Most of the audience here is probably pretty well versed in some of the stuff we're talking about, and it applies to them. So that's a good thing from my perspective. And it's also really exciting to hear that people in that space are already working on voice search. So I think we're really at an opportune time right now.
Nice, very cool. So last question before we close things down and move on. So this next question, I've had a lot of similar ones, but I'll go ahead and read this one out. This SEO is utilizing the Yoast SEO plugin, and there's other tools out there on the market to be able to target their content for multiple keywords or key terms that are all around the same subject matter. So, for example, if someone's going after home mortgages, perhaps they're doing home loans, 30-year loans, et cetera, as key terms on that page to help optimize for home mortgages and things like that. Should they keep these same variations for voice search or target same variations in terms of targeting for a core topic or subject matter, or should they look at kind of the old school version of building Q&A and different pages for specific oriented terms?
Sure. So I don't have a ton of insight in terms of whether it should be an FAQ page versus on existing pages. My gut feeling is you should be adding snippets to those existing pages rather than creating brand new pages, because those don't have any history. So if you create a brand new FAQ page, it's not going to have much history behind it in terms of people visiting that page in the past. So I would recommend, again, we were talking about featured snippets, and peppering those throughout your site would make more logical sense. And of course, driving those snippets should be related to the content on the page as well, much like we saw on the Comic-Con About page that we saw. So I would recommend that. I wouldn't recommend changing essentially your strategy of what content and what keywords that you're targeting. It's the same, at the end of the day, you spend a lot of time and effort on understanding what does that business do effectively, and what are the conversion rates of when customers are searching, being able to convert that into a lead for that business. That's not going to change with voice search. It's really just a different interface to be able to get to those same answers and those same solutions. So it's really just a variation on that, and providing Google with those nuggets and that value, with those answers really to answer questions that will allow you to kind of optimize and get on page one, or ideally in that first search result.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, you shouldn't be forcing the user or Google to scan through pages of content to be able to find the answer, right? You kind of think of it as a feature snippets are like the cliff notes of SEO. So instead of having to go through, read the whole book, et cetera, the fact that you can have a question and then bulleted answers underneath it that summarizes basically the rest of the content on the page or in that section is going to be helpful not only to Google, not only helpful for having that content available to answer voice queries, right, with natural answers as opposed to reading off paragraphs of content, but also useful to the user at the end of the day, because who really scrolls down the page anymore before hitting the back? So it's really cool to hear.
Yeah, and I think at the end of the day, you're right about that. Like, essentially, you're providing an answer, but people are always looking for more information. So it really is that answer at the top of the page that, again, that what is Comic-Con that's just going to drive people to click on the link and go to the link. Obviously, sometimes they just want an answer and they're out. If it's, again, like a sports question or whatever, trivia question. But in many cases, if they're looking for solutions, they are going to click on your link and go to your page, and then that is that chance of really converting them into a lead.
Absolutely. It's the difference between what is Comic-Con and how do I purchase a booth at Comic-Con.
Yeah. Yep.
Excellent. So thanks a lot, Colin. Speaking of Comic-Con, that's in a couple weeks in San Diego, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So, yeah, we are located here in San Diego, so it's going to be pretty crazy here. Our office is downtown, so it's always fun to see people get dressed up in costumes and stuff. So it's always a fun time around San Diego during Comic-Con.
Nice, nice, very cool. Well, thanks so much. I appreciate your time. Just to let everyone know, we'll be following up with a video of Colin's presentation, along with the slides from Chapmeter. And then if you have any other questions that weren't answered, we're going to try to get them answered for you in a wrap up. And we'll be featuring this on the SEJ site as well. So thanks again, Colin. Thanks again for everyone that's joined the webinar today. And thanks to the team at Chapmeter for helping to put this together.
Great. All right. Thanks, everybody, and have a wonderful day.
All right. Thank you. We're going to launch a survey right after the webinar is over. So if you could take a quick moment and fill that in, it'll help us make things better and optimize in the future. So thanks a lot again, and enjoy your day.